With the Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl, it is officially time for the NFL offseason. And you know what that means? It's mock draft season. So let's get right to my first full 2-round NFL mock draft as we look ahead to the 2025 NFL Draft.
With the first pick in the draft, we have the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans need a quarterback, or they have the opportunity to go best player available because their roster really isn't that good. With the first pick in the draft, I have the Tennessee Titans going Abdul Carter out of Penn State. Watching Abdul, he seems like a very, very solid NFL edge rusher, a guy who's going to come straight out of college and give you 8 to 10 sacks in his first season. So I really like him going to Tennessee there, shoring up that pass and run defense. Next, we got the Cleveland Browns. Now, part of me really wants to go best player available here, do them a solid by going with Travis Hunter, but another part of me also wants to say, hey, maybe they go Cam Ward because they need a quarterback. What I think they're going to do, I think they're going to go Travis Hunter out of Colorado. Kevin Stefanski has worked with Kirk Cousins before. I think they get him from the Falcons if the Falcons end up releasing Kirk this offseason. Next up, we got the New York Giants. Now, the New York Giants, I think they really need a quarterback, so I actually have them going Cam Ward out of the University of Miami. Next up, we've got the New England Patriots. The Patriots have a really bad roster, leading me to believe that they're going to go best player available in this draft because they've already got the quarterback position figured out. Now, what do they really need? Offense. Any position on offense outside of quarterback, the Patriots can take here. So it's going to come down to what position is the best. And my best player on the board outside of running back here is Ted McMillan out of Arizona. So I'm going to have them taking him. Next, we got the Jacksonville Jaguars. I could see them going defense here, specifically either corner or D-line. So I'm going to take the best of those two positions on the board. And I think that's Mason Graham out of Michigan. He's an extremely good disruptor. Reminds me a lot of a guy like Jalen Carter. So I'm going to take Mason Graham. Next up, we've got the Las Vegas Raiders. I don't know what the Raiders are going to do. Part of me thinks they're going to bring in Russell Wilson and give him a contract so that they can get that quarterback position figured out while they're building the talent around the roster before they bring a quarterback in. But another part of me really thinks, hey, just go Shedeur Sanders, make the easy pick here. I don't think he's good enough to be the 6th pick in the draft, but quarterback's a position you're going to reach for, and I think that's what the Raiders are going to do here. If not, look for them to take Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State because I think he's probably a top 2 player in this entire draft, if not top 3. Okay, next up, we got the New York Jets. The Jets need a quarterback, interior D-line. They could use some pass rushers too, or any of the DB positions on the field. Outside of Sauce Gardner, they're pretty weak back there. We saw that once Robert Saleh got fired this year. So what do I think they're going to do? I really like them going Will Johnson out of Michigan. He's a solid corner, but the question then becomes, are you trying to solidify that back end that much, or do you want to put it up front? I actually think they're going to put it on that back end. When you get 2 stud corners, it makes life really easy on the DC. So that's what we're going to do here is go Will Johnson out of Michigan. Next up, we got the Carolina Panthers. They need help on that defense. They were on pace to be one of the worst defenses in NFL history for a majority of this year. They shored it up in some games, but there were a lot of flashes of it coming back. Now, you have talent. Derek Brown's going to come back from injury, but what do you ultimately do here? What I see them doing is taking a pass rusher or best defender available. My best defender available right here is Malachi Starks out of Georgia. He's an extremely good safety, but the question becomes, do you think it's worth taking a safety with the number 8 overall pick, or do you think it's more important to get a pass rusher, right? Someone who can come in and stop the run, make some big plays for you. So what I think they end up doing here is taking Michael Williams out of Georgia. Really dominant guy when he's healthy. He wasn't healthy for a majority of this season, so I'd love to see what he gets back to in his rookie season in the NFL. Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints. You need skill positions. You have Derek Carr. Who knows what you're doing with him? You're probably going to cut Taysom Hill this year. So outside of Kamara, you have 0 weapons on this offense. So the question becomes, are you taking tight end or are you taking wide receiver? Because we know you're not going running back. Like I said, your only position on offense that you have is Alvin Kamara. So what I think they ultimately do here is go Luther Burden III out of Missouri at that wide receiver position. Sure up a need right there. Next up, we got the Chicago Bears. They need a running back bad, but they also need offensive line help just as bad. So the question becomes, do you take a generational running back in Ashton Jeanty, or do you take a really solid guard that could maybe play tackle in the league in Will Campbell? Part of me wants to go running back because we saw what Ben Johnson could do with the Lions at that running back position, but what I ultimately think they're going to do is go Will Campbell out of LSU. Next up, we've got the 49ers. They also need O-line help or D-line help, right? Outside of Nick Bosa right now, that defense doesn't look incredible. People keep getting banged up year after year, and you need more depth on that defense, but you need O-line help really, really bad. So what do? I think you draft Trent Williams' replacement, maybe get this guy to play guard for you too, but I think you go Kevin Banks Jr. out of Texas. His tape is solid. My probably best tackle in this draft is Josh Simmons out of Ohio State, but he tore his ACL and didn't play a lot of his senior season at Ohio State. So what is he going to do? Who really knows? So we're going to go Kevin Banks Jr., take the safer pick here. Next up, Cowboys. If this guy's on the board, please, Jerry Jones, make the right pick. Nothing more to say. Ashton Jeanty, one of the best running back prospects we've ever seen. Next up, we got the Miami Dolphins. Javon Holland's leaving in free agency. You probably need help on that O-line. You definitely need help in that pass rush as well. So what do? Ultimately, I have them taking Malachi Starks, fill in for Javon Holland. This is a really deep draft in terms of pass rushers, so I think you can do that later on. Now, it's either that or O-line help here. I could see them going O-line, but I just think Malachi Starks is a heck of a ball player. I think you'd be great getting him at number 13. Next up, we got the Colts. If this guy's available, it's a no-brainer pick. You need weapons for Anthony Richardson. You've got a few receivers out there who are pretty solid. Take Tyler Warren, amazing tight end who can contribute really well for your football team. Next up, we've got the Falcons. Who do the Falcons take? They need a pass rusher. Everything else on that defense looked awful because of how bad their pass rush was. They traded for Matthew Judon, didn't get much production out of him. So what we're really looking at here is who's the best edge rusher available. I look at a guy like Nick Scourton. Mike Green is probably my favorite prospect in this draft. Dominated the Senior Bowl, comes from a smaller school, left the Senior Bowl early. He actually did so well at it. So I like Mike Green out of Marshall there at pick number 15. At 16, we've got the Cardinals. We know they need O-line help extremely bad. That and help on that D-line is probably their two biggest needs. Maybe another skill position. Outside of Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, you don't have too much. But what I really like them to do here is go Josh Simmons, tackle out of Ohio State. My favorite tackle if he didn't get injured to end his final season at Ohio State. So I love that pick here for the Cardinals. Next up, we've got the Bengals. You're probably going to let T. Higgins walk, right? Joe Burrow keeps saying, pay everyone, pay everyone, pay everyone. He wants T. Higgins there. But it's hard to win in the NFL if you're paying your quarterback and top two receivers as much money as they're going to have to pay them to keep them. So you look at receiver and you're like, the talent here doesn't justify skipping on some of these defensive prospects. I like Benjamin Morrison here, Walter Nolan here, maybe even Shamar Stewart or Nick Scourton here. But who I have them ultimately taking here is Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss. You're replacing some of the guys on D-line that you let walk because you refuse to pay them in the last offseason. So that's what I have them doing. He's extremely disruptive, has amazing moments, but can also be a non-factor at some times. But I think that'll be fixed in the NFL with even better coaching. So next up, we've got the Seahawks. Seahawks need O-line help more than anything else. But they also have a defensive head coach who wants to build up the defense. So the question is there a guy on that offensive line who we think is going to be good enough to warrant a pick here, right? You're pretty good at the tackle spot, but Armand Membo is a guy who you can move to guard, and I really, really like him out of Missouri, so I have them taking him here. Next, with the 19th pick, you're losing your linebackers as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So what do? You need to take linebacker, but you also could use a pass rusher, a DB. So what's the best position available here? Do you take Benjamin Morrison? That's what I have you doing here. I wouldn't be surprised if they went pass rusher or even Jahad Campbell out of Alabama. I don't hate that pick either, but Benjamin Morrison fell a little in draft to pick 19. I have them taking him here. Next, we got the Broncos. Man, my favorite pick here, if you aren't going receiver, is Colston Loveland out of Michigan. The Broncos haven't had a good receiving tight end since they traded away Noah Fant to the Seattle Seahawks in that Russell Wilson deal. So I have them taking Colston Loveland. Great pick here. Next up, we got the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who do the Pittsburgh Steelers take here, right? You need a quarterback. You need a receiver. You need help in that back end of that secondary, and you need a 5 technique on that D-line. So really, what can you get? Kenneth Grant is a solid pick here, but are you going to reach on interior defensive linemen when you just had Cam Hayward being all-pro? Probably not. A lot of the receivers are still on the board. Emeka Egbuka, Matthew Golden. I really like Emeka Egbuka here, so that's who I'm going to have them taking. Next up, we've got the Chargers. Chargers need a running back, wide receiver, because outside of Vlad McConkey, they don't have much help on that offense. They need a tight end too, but the tight ends just got taken. The Broncos were right ahead of you and took Colston Loveland. So what do? Right? You could take an edge rusher, maybe if you feel like that's the best position available right here. I really don't know what the Chargers are going to do here. I know what they want, and I know those positions are probably going to be gone. So do you take Matthew Golden as the most explosive wide receiver on the board? Probably. Next up, we got the Green Bay Packers. They need a stud receiver. I don't think that's left in this draft, so I hope they address that need in free agency. And ultimately, they need interior O-line help. They need help at that cornerback position and edge help, right? I really like Nick Scourton going here out of Texas A&M. I think it's between the Aggie boys right here, Shamar Stewart or Nick Scourton. I like Nick Scourton going here, so that's where I'm going to have them taking him. Next up, we've got the Vikings. They need interior offensive line help bad. We saw that in that playoff game. They also need some running back help, but this is a really loaded running back draft class, so I don't expect them to reach here. What I really see them doing is probably going with a guy like Kenneth Grant out of Michigan here. Really solid value pick here. Interior D lineman, so not valued as much, but I think it's a great pick at that spot. Next, we've got the Texans. They need O-line help. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Gray Zabel, really great. Can move and play every position on that O-line. Really like him. Smaller school, North Dakota State, but he showed up and showed out at the Senior Bowl, so I think he raised his draft stock enough. Next up, we got the LA Rams. They need a linebacker. This is where I have Jihad Campbell. I think they also want to go with another skill position player here, maybe a tight end, but the two tight ends that we love in this draft are gone. This is a really stacked tight end draft, so the ones that we really, really like are going to be available in that second or third round. That's where I see the Rams probably taking a tight end. Next up, we got the Baltimore Ravens, right? Kyle Van Noy had an incredible season this year, but his age is getting really high up there. Can he continue this? Maybe, but not for too many years. I like Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Now, you probably see James Pierce Jr. here, and you're like, why is this guy still falling? There are just some things on his tape that I don't love. Daniel Jeremiah agrees with me on this. I see him going in the first round still, probably later on in these next 4 picks or so. But what I have the Lions doing is taking interior O-line probably. But there's not much interior O-line left, so unless they find a guy that they really, really like, I see them probably getting help on that defense. Some people have proposed a Myles Garrett trade. I love that. I don't know if you can pull it off, though, so I like James Pierce Jr. out of Tennessee here. Next up, we got the Washington Commanders at pick 29. We've got wide receiver, tackle, edge rusher, corner, so you can really load up here. I really think you're going to be the ones who trade this pick away and get Myles Garrett. I really like the Commanders as his landing spot, but who really knows? So what I ultimately see them doing here, Jahdae Barron fell really far in this draft. I usually have him in that pick 15 to 24 range, but just the way things shaped out, I think they'd love to get Jahdae Barron here out of Texas, put another guy outside of Marshawn Lattimore, really help take a team's number 1 away and then double the number 2. That old Bill Belichick philosophy. So next we've got the Buffalo Bills. They need skill position help, and they need help on that defense, just shoring it up a little more. So what do I have them doing? You have running back, so you're good. You're really looking for a wide receiver, right? Do you like a guy like Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, who I really like? Do you like Elic out of Stanford? And that's what I ultimately see them doing here. They're not a team that reaches too far, so I think they're going to really examine it, and they're going to go between Elic and Tyleik Williams out of Ohio State. But, like I said, they're a team that's not going to reach. So, Tyleik Williams, I think, is the best pick here for them. Next up, we got the Kansas City Chiefs. What do they do, right? You need tackle. You really need every position on the O-line, in all honesty. So who's left? Josh Connerly Jr. out of Oregon. Home run pick there at 31. I expect them to get that pick in really quickly on draft night. Next up, we got the Eagles. Your team is so loaded, you don't really need much, right? You could probably use another corner if you let Darius Slay walk, a wide receiver outside of your 2 studs in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So I look for them to go with the Ole Miss guy here. Do they take Trey Amos at the cornerback position, or do they take Trey Harris at the wide receiver position? And ultimately, I see this man named A.J. Brown stepping up and saying, hey, go get my guy out of Ole Miss, Trey Harris. And that's what I have them doing here. Next up, we got the Cleveland Browns again. We're circling back, right? Earlier on in the draft, we had them going with best player available, Travis Hunter. So we've shored up our cornerback and probably some of our receiver flaws. And I think what we really need here is a running back. I really like Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina here. Running back, first pick of the second round. Love it if you're them. Nick Chubb doesn't look like the same player anymore. As unfortunate as that is, I love Nick Chubb, but it's just a cold hard fact at this point. Next up, we got the New York Giants. What did the New York Giants do? I really have the Giants going DB, maybe linebacker, sure up that spot. Maybe another skill position player, wide receiver, something like that. I think that's what they ultimately do. I'm looking at Trey Amos once again. I'm looking at a guy like Elic because you're probably letting Darius Slayton walk. So I really think they go Elic, make Cam Ward's life a little easier, giving him more receivers to throw to. Maybe go Xavier Restrepo because they have that chemistry there. But I don't know if you need a slot guy that bad. So it's really just up to them at that point. They made a lot of questionable decisions in the draft, so who really knows what they're going to do. Next up, we've got the Tennessee Titans with pick 35. Titans, like I said, they're a bad roster. They need help. So what are they ultimately going to do? I see the Titans going quarterback here. You went best player available in the first round, but here I think you go quarterback, and my favorite quarterback left is Jaxson Dart. I actually have a video out on my top 5 quarterbacks if you want to check it out up there. But Jaxson Dart is a really solid prospect. He needs a year before he gets thrown into the fire. But if you can let him sit behind a guy and really train him up, I think that's a really solid pick there for the Titans. Next up, pick 36, you got the Jaguars. We took interior D-line in the first round, took the best player available. Like we said, though, you need a corner. And here, Trey Amos falls straight to you. One of the best cornerbacks in all of college football this year. You shored up your defense in 2 picks. Really great drafting if you do that here. Next up, we got the Raiders. I think they need a running back extremely bad. My running backs left would be a guy like Quinshon Judkins maybe. Maybe his teammate, Trayvon Henderson. Maybe Cam Scatabo. But what I actually think they're going to do, Pete Carroll likes to pound the football. So I like Quinshon Judkins out of Ohio State. Home run pick for them there in my opinion. Looks like a Raider. Played at Ole Miss. Played at Ohio State. Just a great, solid running back. 4'4" guy. Can get you those extra yards through contact. Really great running back. Next up, we got the Patriots. What do the Patriots do here? We took a wide receiver in the first round. Now we're probably going to take another running back, right? Running backs aren't valued as much, but we saw this year they're important to a team. So you got a guy like Cam Scatabo. You got a guy like Trayvon Henderson. You got a lot of guys here. I really like Cam Scatabo, but I don't think he is an elite NFL running back based off of his speed and size at the moment. So I think he's probably going to fall to like round 3 or something like that. I really like Trayvon Henderson out of Ohio State here, just shoring up that offense, continuing to make it better. Next up, we got the Bears with Carolina's old pick in that Bryce Young trade. So who do we think the Bears are going to take, right? We got them O-line help in the first round. Now we're saying, are there any running backs on the board that we see as better than DeAndre Swift? I would say, yeah, probably. But you need an edge rusher. Take Jack Sawyer. Showed up on a big stage in the national championship and all the playoff games before that. Proven winner, why not? Next up, we got the New Orleans Saints. They need a wide receiver, tight end, D-line. We took them a wide receiver in the first round. They could go for another wide receiver here. So it really comes back to who do you have graded the best? I really like TJ Sanders out of South Carolina here. I do. I think he's a really great interior D lineman. So that's who I have them taking. That South Carolina defense was really solid this year, and we really got to see that down the stretch. Next up, we got the Bears again. They are really able to just load up in this draft class, take the best players available, and do with it what they may. What I like them going with here is Tyler Booker out of Alabama. Solid guard, is going to be a solid guard in the league. I don't think he'll ever be an all-pro, but he's going to be a sure offensive lineman. Hit from Alabama, so I like them taking him here. Next up, we got the Jets again. What do the Jets do? I don't really know for sure how they feel inside that building. We've taken a cornerback earlier on in the draft. Now we need more help on that D-line. We need a quarterback, but I don't think any of the quarterbacks left are good enough to justify a second-round pick on. I really don't. They would love for Jaxson Dart to fall to them here with pick 42. And it may happen in the draft. And if it does, I think that's who they take. But I really think you're just in the opportunity of like, hey, what's the best player available? Like, who can we take that'll make our roster better? And I really think that guy is maybe Demetrius Knight Jr. Just get a linebacker. It's not really a position of need necessarily, but really solid player still on the board. So I like that there. Next up, we've got the 49ers. Are you paying Talanoa Ufanga? If you don't, Xavier Watts is a great replacement. I have them taking him here. Ufanga's battled injuries. I don't really like paying him when another team is probably going to give him the bag at some point. So take his replacement in Xavier Watts. I love that pick there. Next up, we got the Cowboys. We took Ashton Jeanty in the first round. We still need some wide receiver help, some tackle help maybe, some edge rusher help. So do we take Donovan out of Boston College? Because honestly, with what we're looking at right now, outside of Xavier Restrepo at wide receiver, I just don't love any of the picks. But I think they need a receiver. Jerry's the type of guy he's willing to reach, so I like Xavier Restrepo here at 44. Not too bad of a reach, but definitely a little bit of one. Next, we've got Siobhan Revell out of East Carolina going to the Indianapolis Colts. Freak athlete who got hurt this season. Let's see if he can bounce back and test well at the combine. But if he does, I love this value at pick 45 here. 46, we need wide receiver still. We need edge. We need as many pass rushers as possible, honestly. That's why I'm going to keep maybe taking another edge rusher here. I like Jalen Walker out of Georgia. I don't think he should fall this far in the draft, but he might. So I really like Jalen Walker at pick 46. Pick 47, who do we take, right? We took O-line in the first. That was our biggest need. Now, interior D-line is what I think we're going to look at here. Interior D-line, we got Derek Harmon, who I really, really like. And I think that's who you're probably going to take here if you're Oregon. Next up, we've got the Dolphins. I think you go interior D-line too. I know these aren't the sexiest of picks, but I think it's what you need to help make your team pretty solid. So you take Omar out of Tennessee. Next up, you've got the Cincinnati Bengals. Do you want to get a receiver here? Jack Beck is not the most explosive guy in the world. I don't think he's a great T. Higgins replacement. I don't really know what they're going to do at that spot if they don't bring him back. But I think you just continue to shore up the defensive side of the ball. Maybe look at your corners here. I really like Maxwell Hairston or Azariah Thomas. But I ultimately think you're going to go Maxwell Hairston here. Really solid corner out of Kentucky. Has some stuff to work on, definitely, but I think he's an improvement over what they had last season. Next up, we got the Seattle Seahawks. Is there an offensive lineman available? Because you are really trying to build this O-line. Probably not, right? There's no one who's really good value here, because that position just isn't super stacked in this draft class. So we're probably going to go edge or linebacker here. We have a few solid guys. I really like Donovan out of Boston College here. I think you get an edge rusher. Shore up that defense with a defensive head coach. It looked a lot better down the stretch last year, but there were still moments where it didn't look the best. So there we go. Next up, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I really would have liked to get them a linebacker in the first round of that draft, but just how the board fell, we couldn't. But here we're going to look at the linebackers, and we're going to go best linebacker available. Chris Paul Jr. is solid. He's a pass rusher, though. I really like Carson out of UCLA. The other guys, there's kind of a big fall off after that. So I think they take Carson out of UCLA here. My bad. Next up, we got the Broncos. You're really in a position now at this point in the draft. This draft isn't the best. So who do you take? Do you want to go with a running back because your running backs aren't incredibly productive? I think that's what they're honestly probably going to do. And I really like, for them, Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. I think he's a solid pick there for the Broncos. Next up, we got the Steelers. Are you letting Najee Harris walk? If you do, you need a running back as well. And I really like Cam Scatterbo in that position because I don't think you should pay Najee Harris. I think he's going to get more money somewhere else. Next up, we got the LA Chargers. Who do I think the Chargers are going to take? This one's hard because they're in a position where their roster is pretty solid, but you're losing some guys. So I really like Landon Jackson out of Arkansas. Khalil Mack probably won't be returning to the team. I like replacing him here. Next up, you got the Green Bay Packers. Who did the Packers take, right? That's going to be the question that we've got to figure out right here. Ultimately, I like the Green Bay Packers going with receiver here, hoping that he's just decent enough and better than what they have, because they have a lot of C+, B- guys. They need a guy who can step in there and catch the ball, get open, things like that. Jack Betch isn't going to get super open, but he's a sure hands guy, so I like him there. Next up, we got the Buffalo Bills. What do the Buffalo Bills do, right? They still need skill position help on offense, but they still need to shore up that defense too. We took defensive interior in the first round, so what do we do here? I think we take an edge, and we just continue to get better at that. We take Princely out of Ole Miss. Ole Miss had a very solid defense this year, and there are a lot of key contributors on it who are still sitting around and available here. Next, the Texans. You need a receiver, but the receivers are weak. Do we think Jaden Higgins or Jalen Royals is worth it? Maybe even Isaiah Bond. I really liked Isaiah Bond this season. Some people aren't as highly on him, PFF for instance, but I think you take Isaiah Bond out of Texas, improve that wide receiver core, make your life a little easier. Next up, we've got the Panthers. They need defense. They're going to continue to need defense the entire way. So what do we do here? I like Darian Porter out of Iowa State. I like them taking him here. Next up, we've got the Baltimore Ravens. Who do the Ravens take? Is roster stacked? We filled our need in the first round. So do we continue to draft that position and hope one of them hits? Do we draft a corner? Because that's what you've been trying to do over the past few years, and it really hasn't been working out the best for you. That's what I like them doing. I like Azariah Thomas here. Really solid pick at 59. I like him more than PFF does, obviously. But next up, we've got the Lions. What do the Lions do here with pick 60? Can you go best player available? You took an edge rusher in the first round. Do you take Ursery out of Minnesota and move him to guard? If you've seen on tape that he can play guard, sure. I haven't watched enough of his tape to know, but I like him going there, taking the best offensive lineman available. They like to play 6 offensive linemen, so even if he can't play guard, he'll be a great 6th man on that offensive line. Add some depth as well. Next, we got the Commanders again. What do the Commanders do? I like them taking Jaden Higgins out of Iowa State. Either that or Jalen Royals. Next up, we got the Bills again. Man, what do the Bills do here? I think they probably go receiver. I like them going Jalen Royals here. Kansas City Chiefs. That O-line continues to need help. You probably could use a linebacker here. So I like you going Kyle Kennard, can play on that edge, really help set it against these better teams because you need to find excellent rookies because you're paying so much money to these top guys each and every year. But you could also use a running back. So what do? I honestly, now that I think about it a little more, I like them going running back here. You take the last top tier running back in the draft here, and Dylan Sampson, I think. Next up, you got the Eagles, right? What do you need the most? Took a wide receiver in the first round. You probably need a corner here. Could use a pass rusher. I mean, your pass rush is insane, but why not just keep making it better and better? I don't really like any of their positions of need here, so I think you honestly just have to go best player available, which is an edge at the moment. So I think that's what you do. You take JT or you take Donovan Jaxson as a potential replacement for Lane Johnson in 2 years. Same way you did with Jason Kelsey and Cameron Jurgens. So that's what I think they're going to ultimately do. Donovan Jaxson out of Ohio State. And that concludes my 2-round NFL mock draft for the 2025 NFL Draft. Let me know what you think down below and grade how I did. Thank y'all for watching.